Hello, everyone. I hope you're doing well. Happy Friday. I'm Kyler Cheatham with The Confluential here. I'm a partner and I am joined by Adam Cheatham, our CEO. And I'm excited to be able to have this conversation with you this morning looking at how we structure IT departments, right? What does that mean, whether you're in a high growth environment or you're a larger enterprise that's trying to stabilize your IT organization, to be more flexible, to keep up with evolving technologies or the needs of your business systems? That's kind of what we're talking about today. So before we get into it, I'll just cover a few logistics of the live and then we'll turn it over to Adam to do just a quick intro. The goal of the Confluential Lives in these conversations on Fridays is just to talk about what we're seeing with our real clients in the marketplace. And then also to have a conversation in a safe space where you can ask these questions without being, trying to sell you any systems or anything like that. It just gives an opportunity to be able to have and answer those questions in our community here. So we go live every Friday. We go live on Tuesdays and Thursdays on TikTok as well to provide some of those questions. I actually brought some of our questions from the TikTok live over today so that I can ask Adam and we can get a few of our questions answered there too, kind of across platform community involved in that, because it really doesn't matter, right? What we say, it matters what's best for your business. And that can be really as unique as our DNA as people. So with that, if you could just drop where you're joining us from today in the chat so that we can kind of test that feature. We're live on LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, and a variety of places there. So we always like to know where our audience is from. And welcome, Adam. Good morning to you.
Well, good morning again. I'm glad to be doing this regular live stream that we do. Glad to be here today. This is a good topic of conversation as we start thinking about the IT department, right? I always think of the IT department as service oriented to the needs of the business. Sometimes that perspective gets me into a little bit of trouble, but at the end of the day, there IT has a function, and it is to serve the needs of the business in a way that adds value. And our goal with many of our clients is to help them maximize that. And everybody's on a different part of the maturity curve as it comes to IT, from the very early beginnings of an organization where you have one person who runs all of the IT organization, to the organizations that have thousands of IT folks in them. Everybody has a place on the IT maturity curve, and we help a lot of organizations with growing along that curve as they're finding themselves in a space where their business needs and their organizational needs are more advanced than their current maturity on that, or how they're manifesting that. There's a lot of growth that comes in that, and sometimes it helps to have a different perspective on what it looks like, what the next step looks like, and what it is that's going to be necessary to accomplish that. So I'm looking forward to this conversation.
So I always start with, and we're happy to have you guys here from the United States, and it looks like we have some European users as well. So thank you so much for joining us. But that, Mick took the question right out of my mouth. So what is the gold standard of IT maturity? If I'm a company and I'm like, okay, I'm a Fortune 500 company, and
Croatia too.
I know
Let's
Croatia.
not
We've
leave
got a
all
lot of
the Europeans out. Very cool.
we hammered home. We pumped you up on TikTok this week, Adam. So you got a lot to prove up in here.
All right, let's do this.
Yeah. So what does that look like? Like if I'm an organization, Fortune 500 company, and I'm like, how do I know if I have a mature IT department?
So I would say that question in and of itself is kind of a misdirected angle, right? Every organization has a quote unquote mature IT department. Just the level of maturity that it is and what stage that's at is different, right? If I'm a large organization that has a significant set of business needs, that doesn't mean that mature is something that is a benchmark for am I doing it right? It's a
Mhm.
spectrum or a curve, right? So I think of IT maturity as a growing set of capacities for meeting organizational needs. So what does a mature IT department look like? It depends on what stage, right? If we have a business who has a fully developed systems environment with a variety of different integrations, we're talking about teams that build APIs. We're talking about teams that have a data warehouse, a master data management platform, and all of those things. We have a highly mature IT department, right? Folks that write code. We've got custom grown apps. We're talking about bringing in AI into our operational technology and having an IT role in that. We've got a cybersecurity department and protocols for that. We have a full blown dev test prod environment. These are all high maturity IT things.
Mhm.
Um, what I find is generally lacking is those things develop on their own organically, and there's a lag in the support structure for that. And the best example is just in the general software development lifecycle, regardless of whether or not you're waterfall or agile. None of that matters from a maturity perspective. And I realize it might be a very controversial thing to say that agile doesn't mean more mature and waterfall doesn't mean less mature. They're just different. But if we have that side, that kind of a mature systems environment, the organizational support from an IT perspective needs to match it.
Mhm.
So I, if I am in an active environment where I have a dev, test, production set of environments that are organized on a release-based structure that is taking in enhancements on a regular cadence,
Mhm.
you'd be surprised at how many organizations don't sync those regular cadences,
Yeah.
right? My CRM and my ERP are releasing code at different times. Data warehouse is doing a release this weekend, and ERP knows nothing about it, right?
Mhm.
That's where the organizational maturity isn't matching the actual systems maturity and
Mhm.
environmental ecosystem maturity, and that's something that has a lot of room for growth.
Absolutely. And I think the biggest shift, like we've seen IT go from more of a cost center, right, to a business strategic partnership. And that is a shift that not all organizations are comfortable making in that way. So I think looking at how you actually go to a strategic operating partner as opposed to just the tickets fixers has been a huge shift, and that in my opinion really starts with the leadership team. What do you think um, about that? And thank you for the question. What do you do on this live stream? We take your questions. We're talking about IT maturity, but anything that goes down to technology strategy, we are experts in heavy industry, but we can talk about systems or anything like that. A lot of times on my TikTok lives, you have lots of questions about certain systems that fit together, so definitely welcome and appreciate that. It's really whatever questions you guys have, we talk about. So tell us about that leadership structure, how important that is.
Well, and the leadership structure is a key part of this because at the top of the leadership structure, you have a function that sets the organizational goals, right? And as we talk about this, what is this live stream about? What is the confidential about? IT delivery is a manifestation of some of the things that we do at the confidential, where you have a strategic top directive. This is what we ought to be doing as an organization, and then you have to figure out how technology fits into that. And it's important to us to separate those two things, and that the strategic directive isn't use technology. It's accomplish this set of goals, and then that set of goals is ought to be enabled by technology. So when we start to pull in the IT department in this, we have strategic goals that become projects. I want to add this type of sales channel, or I want to create this new product line in manufacturing. I want to be able to manage my turnover and warehousing more effectively. I want to be able to improve my demand planning in order to shrink my lead times in my supply chain. All of those are business goals that can be solved with technology that then turns into a request to IT, right? Can you build me a demand planning module or a demand planning application or enhancement to our existing demand planning application that allows me to shrink my lead times and my cycle time in production and be able to produce more on time with reduction in inventory? Then IT says, I can build that project for you. And there's a conversation that happens between IT and the business. That project gets scoped, that project gets developed. And then there's a collaboration between testing and redevelopment, resolution of bugs and defects. And then we have a release, right? All of that is all bound in the question of, am I building the right thing for you?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Am I building what's in alignment with those strategic objectives so that as an organization, we can continue down that path? What we find very often is that the leadership says, go build this. And then IT doesn't talk to the demand planning team and they go build something.
Mm-hmm.
And then they say, we release this. And the demand planning team says, what? You built me something. Okay, cool. What did you build? We built all this stuff. That's great, but I just bought this other application that does something entirely different than what you built, and I'm going to use that. Now, this is a failure in that conversation of IT service delivery, right?
Mm-hmm.
I went and built something without asking what it is you need,
Mm-hmm.
and I could have spent all that time building something that you do, right? So that's kind of the way I think about it from an organizational maturity perspective and the IT management
Yeah.
services.
Okay, I'm going to give you a scenario, and I want you to tell me like how you would break it down. I just want to acknowledge the comments. I always appreciate learning where people are here from. So welcome, Dean, and all of our different people on here. If you have questions, pop them in the chat. I give Adam a lot of scenarios like this because I feel like it's hard to break down like what are we actually talking about. So I've got Stu, right? Stu from IT that
Okay.
has been at the company for 17 years, right? He knows everything. He knows which server can be like rebooted on Tuesdays. He knows like that some sort of like temporary workaround from 2014 is now like completely mission critical. He knows that one vendor contact that will actually answer the phone and some sort of like weird undocumented job that runs at like 2:17 a.m. And if it doesn't, payroll fails, right? All of those different things. If Stu leaves the organization, it is absolutely going to disrupt a variety of different things. He's that one in the room was like, if there's a problem, did we ask Stu? It's a huge risk to the organization, but it's worked for that amount of time. So maybe leadership knows that IT isn't exactly stable without Stu, but they're not worried about it at this moment because he can fix anything that goes wrong. What would you say to that type of organization?
Let's say it sounds like Stu's pretty important and that we ought to be asking him how things work, right? So there's a part of this, like Stu's value to this conversation is inherent in that he understands where the bodies are buried, if you will, right? And that's a key critical architecture function that is, if I get these things from these systems and they're connected in these ways, right? And Stu is going to be a key part in understanding that. So when somebody asks for for a change to how we run payroll. Let's say we're changing our benefits provider, or we're changing our finance module. We're changing the finance system. We're leaving the HR and the payroll side of it alone. And Stu comes in, he says, right, but payroll is a finance function, and we calculate the deductions here in whatever other system that passes over in this type of a file format so that the finance module can then create paychecks, right? That's a there's a joint function in that payroll piece of it between HR and finance that Stu is going to be able to tell us. So when the business wants and needs something, Stu can talk about how that happens and what the best way of accomplishing it is so that it happens in a way that maintains the integrity of the environment while also giving the business what it is they're looking for.
And so that is the definition of tribal knowledge. No?
It is. That is the
Yeah.
definition of tribal knowledge. Stu knows a lot of stuff. And there's turning that into IT operations. There's a training element involved in that, right? There's an operational piece of the puzzle, which if you haven't been giving Stu some folks to train up on how it is this works, and putting him in a coaching environment, and he's just writing all the code. He's been writing all the code for 15 years. You have created a bit of a challenge in that I've worked with lots of organizations that are custom coded AS400 systems, and the guy that maintained it was like, I'm retiring. And they're like, what? I'm retiring, and I'm retiring in 3 months. That's a long time, right? Like that. And they go, all right, well, we need to do all this. And he's like, well, I'm the only one who wrote all the code. And they're like, well, then we need a new ERP. Well, you're like 12 months behind starting that implementation, let alone finding the right one. So what ends up happening in most organizations is Stu becomes a contractor.
Uh-huh.
His Stu retires, and you say we can't live
Good for
without you,
Stu.
Stu. And he says, "Well, my rate is now X dollars an hour, and I'll be happy to do this on my on my time off." Hopefully, Stu has a sense of pride in the work that he's done, and certainly hopefully Stu has a sense of pride for your organization and a sense of responsibility that he built a lot and then wants to see that through. But at the end of the day, you put yourself in a position where you need Stu. And
Hmm.
that's not a bad thing. It's not a good thing. It's just a thing, right? Stu is
Hmm.
important. It's just the way certain people are important in your organization over time. So there are different tactics for different positions in IT management. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Stu is important for sure, but that can really put the business at a huge risk. I like this question. What's the most common moment that forces IT leaders to rethink their operating model?
So this is a fantastic question. When we start thinking about rethinking our operating model in IT, it generally has to do with the point where IT doesn't know what they should be working on and why, right? At every change in maturity on the IT management side of things in the operational relationship. If IT doesn't know what it should be working on and why, then we have an issue that needs more structure, right? Working with an organization right now where I ask that direct question, and they have a fairly mature development team. What if you have one additional hour today and you had nothing to do, but you were going to do that, spend that hour working on something? Would you know what you should work on next and why? And they didn't
Mhm.
know. They're like, well, I just pick something I can get done. Is it, for some organization, that's not a bad thing. That's not a bad answer. In this organization, there is a sense of if I just work on what could get done, I may end up wasting time on something that's low priority because I have
Mhm.
so many things to be done.
Mhm.
And as much as the business likes to think that everything's important and everything must be done right now, if you sit them in a room and ask them to stack rank things, you will find that there are some things that aren't that important, and there are
Mhm.
some things that really are. And so in that scenario, this question of does my IT team know what they ought to be working on next and why, um, is a common moment where we rethink our approach to our operating model. That operating model might be, no, I don't know what I should be working on next and why, because I'm a one-man team and I have 9 different things and 10 different people asking me for these 9
Mhm.
different things. And so I've got to figure that out. And part of the problem in that is my capacity. And it doesn't have to do with priority, it has to do with my ability to add value with my time. And so maybe the operating model becomes, all right, we need somebody else
Mhm.
to add to our team. Maybe it's a look, I can write code, but this infrastructure thing, we're talking about setting up servers, we're talking about creating a network and this, that, and the other. That's not my skill set. And if that's not your skill set, then now we have a change in our operating model, right?
Mhm.
And then as we start talking about capacity, things grow. And again, yes, that do we know what we should be working on next and why? And so that becomes a key part of the conversation. That's at least a question I like to ask that gets me somewhere when I start
Yeah.
figuring out what should be our operating model.
So along those lines, if you go into an organization and they're like, which you do often, right? And it's like, hey man, I don't know if our IT team is functioning, but I know we have like some dysfunction, right? Within here of like we've been working on an implementation for 3 years. We're not able to do all of these different things. Let's see what's going on here. What are going to be some main like red flags that you see? And then I'll get to our other question here in the comments too.
Yeah. So main red flags that I see in this kind of conversation of what are we doing here? What ought we be doing is the growth of the shadow IT organization in the business, right? When you're having disjointed conversations where you're saying, I built this thing, and the business says, I didn't want that, I bought this instead, so go do that. If that conversation is sideways, that's a real red flag, right? If the business isn't talking to IT and IT isn't talking to the business on how these things come together, that's a red flag, right? Are we not doing this? Are we not having this conversation? Do we not have a list of things to do that are prioritized by the business? That's an interesting scenario to be in, and it's more common than you think. And there's, I like this question
Mhm.
from Mahmoud in that, multiple failures in this type of software development lifecycle with external vendors creates problems. It creates miscommunications. It creates areas of misalignment. And so they've gone to this no code, low code approach. And there's a value in that. And the capabilities of low code, no code tools are growing.
Mhm.
But at the same time, I think that um, there will still be a need for more advanced IT roles in development, right? The IT role is changing, and the expectations from IT are changing. Where I think that, and I've got 2 clients right now that are having a similar question on the what is the role of IT and how much of IT roles need to understand the business. How many roles should we have in that are designed for the purpose of understanding the business? What's the difference between a business analyst, a technical analyst, and a systems analyst,
Mhm.
right? Some organizations, they're all the same thing. In other organizations, those are very different things. And I think that the growth and maturity on this as we start thinking about turning tribal knowledge into IT operations is that improvement in understanding of the needs of the business, where IT needs in an ideal environment, right? And this is not to say if you're not there, if you don't have this, then you're screwed. But in an ideal environment, IT knows the business well enough to say, if I build this way, it's likely to be useful because I know what they're looking for to a certain degree. so that when I go and show them what I built, they're not like, what is that? And what is it supposed to do? That says that, I mean, you're talking about baking bread and we make robots, right? That's, there's, you got to know the business well enough to build for them on their behalf so that at least somewhere within IT, there's a team that understands that function. On the flip side, and I think that this is probably the more common issue,
Hmm.
is the business needs to understand IT well enough to know that what they're asking for is reasonable. And that's where I think we're going to see a lot more improvement as time goes on, especially with low code, no code, AI tools, and those types of things, where the business starts to become a bit more technically savvy and saying, this is the tool that I have, or this is the tool that I'd like so that I can be able to do some of this myself. And what this starts to look like is you have a business analyst in the IT side of things, and you have a technical analyst on the business side,
Hmm.
which 15 years ago would be absolute heresy, right? Like, no. The business analysts live in the business, and IT
Yeah.
analysts, technical analysts live in IT. As this should blend, right? So
Yeah.
then that way you're having a fluid conversation between the two teams that's collaborative in nature, as opposed to a black box.
Absolutely. And I think that's so much easier said than done, though. And I mean, that's where I see a lot of people getting stuck is like, yeah, of course we want that collaboration, but we can't just decide today we are like partners and make that work. And a lot of like when we see the rise kind of solution architecture, right? The need for that connection between business systems, even business systems department, those are brought up through the business, and IT is still kind of left siloed on that side. How do you really build a situation in which they're working together?
You get them in a room and you point them at the same thing, right? It sounds simple, but it is, right? Right now, your IT team's working on something, the business is doing something entirely different. And IT has no idea what the business is doing, and the business has no idea what IT is doing. So they get mad at each other for doing things that don't fit. Well,
Mhm.
why? How on God's green earth would I know what you're doing without talking to you about it? Right? Put them in a room. Make yourself a change control board. That's something that we're working with clients on right now. How do you create a change control board? What does that look like? How do you start saying these are all the things that we need? And then what ends up happening is we have a collaboration that's focused on solving problems, not some people that are building some stuff on both sides of the fence and then getting mad at each other because somebody here wasted a ton of time, right? And I'm going to point the finger at you because what I built is useful, right? And that's not from the business or the IT side. That's from either side, right? So put them in a room and pointing them at the same challenge and giving them a chance to collaborate on a solution that comes together is more useful to me. And on one hand, it sounds harder than it is, but on the other hand, it's not. Like, talk to people,
Mhm.
right? Get in a room. You will find out. I promise you, if you sit down and not don't frame it as you did this and I did that. Frame it as what do we need here as a group and how do we accomplish that and in what order. You start creating a conversation in that space and people will point themselves at the problem instead of at each other. And that's a massive change in behavior that only happens by getting people together and helping them see both sides of it.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, talk a little bit about the office of the PMO. Talk a little bit about like how that kind of solves that, or there's a translator between the two, right? Everybody has competing and fluid priorities within the organization, but a lot
Yeah.
of times the PMO or the EPMO or whatever, right, can really help solve that.
Yeah. Well, let's go way back to the day where we didn't have Google Translator, right? And people were trying to have conversations and do business and make trades and stuff like that in different languages. At the end of the day, that's what we're talking about, right? We're talking about one side needs something that the other side has, and they want to talk about how this gets accomplished. So we have something in between that's a common language. In some of those scenarios, you have somebody on one side or the other that speaks both languages, and that's fantastic. But most of the time, especially as your maturity grows as an organization, you find yourself with more of a need to have that translation role in between. A team that's responsible for saying, we're going to put everybody in a room, we're going to ask for all the business needs, and then we're going to look at the IT capacity. We're going to help prioritize those, and then we are going to plan and schedule that work. That's the role of an enterprise PMO in this space. And I built PMOs that are accepting of the fact that we have a business and we have IT, and we need some sort of a liaison between the two, right? That's where that conversation starts. But on one side or another, though, the maturity changes, right? This model starts to stick. And now one side or another becomes a little bit underhanded, right? I don't have enough people to help me do all of this work. And with one of the organizations I'm working with now, their EPMO has changed from when we've got our arms around this now, and IT is responding in a way which is, now I've got to figure out how to accomplish those things. And EPMO is saying, well, this is what we want. And they're saying yes, they're saying no, as they should be. And IT is kind of unprepared for that conversation, because we haven't been talking about how all of these systems are tied together, right? As this EPMO structure takes hold, the requests get more complex, right? People start to understand there's a function here that's available to me. So now we have all these harder questions getting asked, and somebody says, I can do that. And so it gets prioritized. And then we find out that involves 3 other IT teams, and their roadmaps are totally different. This team's the piece that you need from master data isn't going to be available till next year. The team that in your CRM might be able to sneak it in between jobs, but we have a different roadmap. The team that's actually responsible for building this application is like, right, but I need both of those things to solve this need for the business is prioritized by EPMO. And we don't have a capacity conversation. That architecture discussion is developing now, and the IT roadmaps, the individual teams roadmaps are developing now, so that we start to have a cohesive organizational roadmap. And that's the next step for them, and what we're building out there. And how do I start to look at this cohesively, not as a handful of dev teams that have individual roadmaps that service their single teams on the IT side, and more of we have systems that are interdependent now that can be built in a way where they take advantage of each other's strengths. That's a gain in the maturity on the IT side, where IT now needs probably their own, maybe PMO is the wrong set of words for it, but some type of a structure that allows them to be responsive to that, those requests from the business.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, again, those transitions can't happen overnight, right? And everything needs to be in a situation in which you can be flexible and collaborative. Much easier said than done, of course. So when it comes to implementing something like that, right? Like, hey, we see there's little pockets and little silos here. We've got one dev team that's just focused on CRM, and one that's focused on warehouse management. Like, we have all these different solution dev teams, but we need to kind of all be marching in the same direction. When you implement an enterprise roadmap or something like that, how long should you expect that transition to be?
That's it depends type of question, right? It should be transitional in nature, right? You break it down into tactical steps, right? We're gonna design the structure of a change control board. And as we design the structure of a change control board, we're going to name its roles, its responsibilities, and its process for intake. And then we're going to take everything that we already have, and we're going to shove it through that process for intake. And some of it, we're going to say, this is low priority, but it's almost done, so we're going to finish it. And so
Mhm.
we're going to say, this is not that's not a request anymore. That's old. And we're going to get through all of those bits and pieces. And then from there, we say, all right, now that we have our structure, our roles and responsibilities, and our modeling done, we're going to start executing, we're going to start having these conversations with the business. We're going to plug this role in to our actual process. So we're going to have a recurring discussion. That is an important part of the conversation here, right? It's not we talked about it once and we're done. It's a recurring discussion where you talk about it over and over. Now that things have changed, the requests we have new requests that need to be prioritized in line with the
Mhm.
old ones. What's in process? What are our status updates? Now we're having a discussion based on customer A wants this way. Okay, is that important? What's a customer request? Okay, well, let's talk about it, because somebody in the back of the room just told me that customer, it's been like that way for that customer for the past 3 years. They're
Mhm.
just now noticing and they want it differently. It's like this. Obviously, it wasn't that big of an impact. Somebody's making a
Mhm.
huge deal out of it. But if it's been going on that way for 3 years, do we have a change in that
Mhm.
scenario? Did something break? Or have they changed their model? Is this a new contractual agreement? Some of these things are key questions to ask so that we understand what our urgency is on building this new thing for this customer who is all of a sudden hot on it. Those are conversations that we can start having actively.
Yeah. And then how do you make it repeatable, right? Because I
Mhm.
always everyone gets all excited, like we're doing this new thing. We're really going to be disciplined and buckle down in execution. But this has to be a repeatable process that
Mhm.
happens over and over to kind of make the machine a valuable asset to the organization.
Yeah, so you make it repeatable by repeating it, right? So, I mean, it sounds stupid, but um, this is the chain control board meeting is not a one-time meeting. It
Yeah.
happens on a recurring basis, right? This organization, we're starting with monthly, right? That's what we've started with. That's been going okay for the last few months. That's works out fantastic. That seems to actually fit. It doesn't take too much of the business's time, but allows IT to move fast enough to deliver some things in pieces, not in pieces, in whole, but
Right.
one piece at a time.
Yeah.
And that's moving fast enough for them. Other organizations have so much going on where they need to have these things happening weekly, and that's okay too.
Mhm.
Establishing an appropriate cadence that fits your pace is how you make that repeatable, and put it on the calendar and make it an active conversation. I am a real strong believer in, if we sit and we talk for 5 minutes, and we're just BSing, and then we say, "Do we have anything to talk about?" No. All right, cool. It's all balanced. That's a wildly more productive ceremony, if you will, than an email thread that says, "I don't have anything to talk about today. Let's cancel this meeting." Now everybody's like, "Well, if it's not useful to him, it's not useful. Then
Mhm.
why am I going
I'm
to
not
make a
gonna
big deal
go.
out of
Yeah.
it?"
Yeah.
Right? And all of a sudden, if it's not important enough for you to show up and ask, "Do we have any changes?" and it stops happening,
Yeah.
now the function itself isn't important enough
Mhm.
for a 3 minute. We good? Yeah, no, we good? Yeah, all right, we're good. Let's bounce. And I promise you, you'll find more things to talk about than you think. And
Mhm.
what'll actually happen is you don't think you have something going on in that meeting, but somebody will talk about something, and
Mhm.
you'll be like, I need
Mhm.
to be included in that because that's going to impact me here, here, and
Mhm.
here. And all of a sudden, that meeting that you didn't think you needed to go to because you didn't know what was going
Mhm.
to come up is more important because it showed up. And
Yeah.
that's a key part of making this repeatable.
Yeah.
Um, there's some parts about making this repeatable that are also important. There's the execution side of it, right?
Mhm.
You had to follow through. If you're going to make this a repeatable, useful meeting, you have to follow through. IT has to do their part. The business has to remain engaged on having those conversations with IT, because two things could go wrong there. We started having this conversation. IT says, "All right, cool," and they go back to doing nothing. Now the business is like, "Well, this is worthless. we're not doing anything. The IT's not listening, and so I'm going to stop showing up, and now it dies. Or the flip side of it, IT does their part, but the business doesn't do theirs, right? The business needs to be involved in testing. The business needs to be involved in requirements. If the business isn't showing up as a follow-on to this model, then the meeting itself is fruitless because we set all of these priorities and sell IT to go build something in a bubble, and the business doesn't show up to the other conversations. And then they say, well, this isn't working. IT is building the wrong things. Like, right, because you're not showing up to the
Right,
conversation when
right,
IT
because
says,
there's
I need to
no
know what you want me to build. When you say build this, that's not a, okay, here you go.
mhm,
It's a, all right, how do you want me to build this? What should that look like here? What
mhm.
should that look like there? They're called requirements. Yeah. So that should be a part of it.
Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. And this, I mean, this is an interesting question. Do you always need a translator, or will there become a time where you build a shared language? And is the goal to have fewer things that need translating?
Um, I think there will always need to be a
Mhm.
translation, right?
Yeah.
These are two different, distinctly different languages.
Mhm.
Can you build a shared language? I would say so, right? As we talk about generally language in general, um, there's generally, as we generally talk about language in general. Um, Language is something that converges by itself, right?
Mhm.
There are words that come through time that are historically relevant. The internet, um, things like that that become standard across many
Mhm.
languages. That's an
Yeah.
interesting dynamic by itself. But as those things become a standard business, IT, technical language, those common shared terms will come together and create some understanding. But I think there will always be a need for some type of a translation
Mhm.
where this is they're different roles, right? There's
Absolutely.
always a need for translation between sales and production, not because they understand, not because there's any lapse in communication, but because production's needs are different than sales needs, right? They're different
Absolutely.
purposes.
Yeah. So as always, in the last 15 minutes, 10, 15 minutes here we have together, I always want to leave people with things that they can do today, right?
Mhm.
So, say you're in a situation where, you have an IT department and you feel like there could be some more collaboration. I know you said like get IT and business in the same room, but can you give us some like tactical tips of how you start to know like what should my next approach be? Like, when should they reach out to someone to say, "Hey, I need you
Yeah,
to build us like a release management system, or I need help with this," right? Type of thing.
I always go back to tying things to pain points and pain point resolution, objective execution, those types of things. What's the real problem here, right? Um, that will help us understand where we're at on that maturity curve, and asking it's just as important to ask, is that problem a real problem,
Mhm.
right? Jobs are hard.
Absolutely.
I've looked many people in the face and told them, you do realize what you're asking for is for somebody to automate your job.
Mhm.
You're asking IT to build your job. So that why? Because this part, this, that, and the other is hard. And then it becomes a conversation of, okay, this is what it's going to take to do that. And if we accomplish all of those things, your job will be so easy that it's not necessary. Is that what we're going for
Mhm.
here? Um, and it's like, well, no. It's like, okay, so let's remove the it's hard from I have a complicated, complex need.
Mhm.
Is this a problem, and where does it sit in the grand scheme of things? Back to
Mhm.
the customer who's like, all of a sudden this data is not showing the way that I wanted to. Okay, it hasn't been showing like that for years. Why is it a problem now? Well, somebody left or this and the other. Okay, it sounds like you need to learn the way that they did it, type of a thing. So getting back to solving a problem that is worth solving, I think is the key to it. And then as we start understanding what that problem is and what those objectives are, figuring out how we create resolutions that address them directly, and then put in place a plan. And I'll give you an example of a different one that I'm working on right now. A team that wants to right now they have grown their environment and their systems ecosystem to be sufficiently complex that when one team releases something, it actually breaks the other team's functionality in a way that could have been tested through and synced. They make
Mhm.
their adjustments, but this is a prod broke thing right now, right? So it's got to be fixed urgently. All of a
Mhm.
sudden, this fix becomes disruptive to my entire process because I was trying
Yeah.
to build something else. What they're going to do that's going to help solve this is sync their releases. They don't have actual release management right now in the traditional, more mature sense, which is I have certain releases on certain timelines for everybody.
Mhm.
Now we have out of cycle releases that are key critical functions that allow us to be adaptive to the needs of the business more quickly. But we have minor releases and we have major releases. Major releases are going to be twice a year. Minor releases are going to be in the quarters in between.
Mhm.
That way we can say, is this something that can go, must it go out of cycle? Yes or no? Okay. No. Next question.
Mhm.
Can we do this in a minor release because it's more segmented to one, maybe two systems? Yes or no? Yes.
Mhm.
All right. We'll plug it into the Q1 release. We'll be good to go. Or is this something that has a significant architectural
Mhm.
need that makes it so that we need to put it in one of those major releases? And that's how that structure starts to come together on in those types of questions. On the we have problems that need to be solved. It is a worthy problem to solve when you say your independent releases are breaking mine in a way that causes me to be
Mhm.
reactive and diminishes my ability to add value on the timeline that I committed to because these things drop from the sky. The reaction to that they don't um, have yet, but is coming, is you mean you're going to make me wait 6 months on an interval of either 6 or 12 months to get these things that I'm asking for? And this team's going to have to be able to look them in the face and say yes, because you're
Mhm.
asking for something complicated that takes
Mhm.
the collaboration of multiple teams. Now, what we're doing is we're having a collaborative conversation on how bad do you want that thing?
Mhm.
Right? You say it's top
Absolutely.
priority, but now you can't tell me that waiting 6 months so that you get it right is worth it to you. Those are
Absolutely.
contradictory statements, right? So anyway, I'm harping for a minute, but
No, well, I think the biggest piece of that is like, do you really need it? And do you understand what it is? Like your example that you gave earlier. Well, yes, you want to implement this new system, this new agent, whatever, but you don't realize that the data model needs information from X, Y, and Z across the organization. And that's not something you can just like go down the cubicle line and pick up, right? It's
right.
something that is much more detailed than that. And I think understanding that ability to cross collaborate is going to be critical to being, the modern IT department of the future, especially like some of our audience members said, if you're running a low code, no code modular base department, all of those things have to be connected. And that connection is going to be the most important strategic function you have, because if it's disconnected, it's not going to work, right? So,
Yeah. Well, I think that at the end of the day, that's a healthy conversation to have, though, right?
absolutely.
Is there another way of you doing this faster? Because it sounds like this is too slow for you. And now we force you into a different type of consideration for how we solve that problem. If it's a big enough problem, it will get prioritized. I can certainly promise you
Mhm.
that.
Yeah.
But if it's not, then what are our other options here? Um, the other option that, and now this is where it becomes a natural conversation. What I'm about to lay out here is going to sound like a nightmare to everybody, but this is normal responses. These are normal things, right? Where IT says, "All right, that's the reaction they're going to." You mean it's going to take me 6 months, maybe 12? Are you for real on this? And then they're going to say, "Well, how big of a priority is it? Because if it's not a huge priority, it's going to take at least 12." in the business, like, this is ridiculous. In that, part of what's missing is the technical understanding on the business side, right? Why is this a surprise to the business that it would take 6 to 12 months, that it would be so complicated it's going to take that kind of time? There's a misunderstanding there. The flip
Mhm.
side of it is what's going to happen next is the business is going to go, I'm going to make a workaround. I'm going to go buy something.
Yeah.
This is where Salesforce ended up in so many organizations, because they're like, look, you don't even need IT. You just buy our stuff and we'll
Yeah.
be good to
Don't even
go,
talk
right?
to him. Don't even tell
And
him.
this low code, no code stuff starts to come into this conversation too, right? You don't even need IT. There you go. 30% of IT spending is on shadow IT. And what that's not relaying is that that's on trying to react to
Yeah.
shadow IT. They don't even know that what they ought to be spending is 4 times that, because shadow IT is unknown, right? So now the business goes and solves something, and their solution to that needs to be within certain parameters as well, right? If we just go by Salesforce because I can do that without IT, now I got a different problem that should have been solved somewhere else.
Yeah. It's like a lot. I mean, even for me, like it's a lot to like try and formulate like where that goes. I mean, I see why a lot of people, call you for that type of setup, because it's just so unique to the business, right? What are all these different dynamics and relationships? What have you
Yeah,
done before? And what are your huge pain points that you need to solve? Right? And so many, I mean, the normal thing to do right now in 2026 is run to a solution. We're going to buy Salesforce. We're going to do this. We're going to purchase software because that's going to solve all of this messiness under the
mm-hmm.
hood for IT. And they're going to be so happy. And it's like, okay, well, one, they're not going to be so happy, right? Because they have to manage that without you even asking them. And two, do you even understand what that actually means for the rest of the organization, or security protocols, all of those different pieces? So it's a complex conversation. But as you said, if you don't start having it, right? If you're just like, this is the way it is, and you don't start having and asking those questions, then you can't peel back, is the solution a new solution? Or is
Yeah,
it a different process? Or what is this actually going to look like for the future state of the business, so that we can grow all in the same direction instead of, fighting against each other? So I think that's, the
yeah.
biggest takeaway in that
When I
conversation.
think Mick's question on what's the biggest myth about scaling IT that needs to be retired is a good one in this. And the biggest myth is that it's ever going to be perfect, that it's
Yeah.
ever going to be easy, right? One of the things that and we get a question of when do I know I need to hire a consultant,
Mm.
right? Part of the answer to that, and there are many answers to that question, but one of those answers is, can you tell the difference between what's wrong and what's just hard,
Mhm.
right? One of the things I've heard recently is Matthew McConaughey has a skit where he talks about how his dad used to ask him, are you sure you can't do it, or are you just having trouble?
Yeah.
Right? There's a difference between
Oh, yeah.
can't and hard. There's a difference between wrong and hard. And if you can't tell the difference, then get some help figuring it out. Because some of this stuff is hard and it ought to be, right? That reaction to IT is going to have this release management schedule, anticipating what the business's response to that is going to be, and that what their reaction to that is going to be, is something you can do, right?
Mhm.
You can look that far into it and say, what would a normal human response to being told no, not
Mhm.
right now be? It'll be, well, I'll go figure out how to do it by myself, because
Mhm.
this is too hard this way. This is wrong. Too hard became misinterpreted as wrong. So I'm going to try to find an easy path. And we have
Mhm.
this instant gratification need these days for what I want, that it clouds our judgment on what I should get.
Mhm.
And so that's something that as we start thinking about miss and scaling and all of these things, is that one day it will be easy.
Mhm.
It's only gonna get harder. We,
Yeah.
we we talk about with our kids, right? Our 2-year-old had 2-year-old problems.
Mhm.
Our 5-year-old has 5-year-old problems. problems. Our 7-year-old has 7-year-old problems. They're not, they aren't going away. They're
Hmm.
just changing. That's just hard a different way.
Hmm.
It's not wrong. It's just hard. And that's
Yeah.
a part of the deal. So we should be thinking about IT in that way and understanding the difference between what's wrong and what's hard. And if you can't tell the difference, ask somebody, get some help
Yeah.
with that.
Yeah.
Or if you can and something is clearly wrong, you can ask for help with that too, of course,
Yeah.
right? But that's a good indicator that you need some help in interpretation.
Yeah. Most definitely. I think that that is such an important piece to be able to understand is where are you at and can you rise above to know if you need to make changes, and sometimes the answer
Mhm.
is no, and that's totally fine. Right, the faster you get to that conclusion that like, hey, I need someone else to evaluate this, the
Yeah.
more that you can create progress and create value in the organization faster. So
When I was in a CCB call yesterday where someone's like, this has been a problem for ages and ages and ages. We need to solve this. We need to solve this now. So okay, if we don't solve that, then if we solve that first, all of these things get behind it and we'll get done next. And it's like, well, if you put it that way, this is not a problem. We could sit on this forever. As far as
yeah,
I'm
right,
concerned, somebody
yeah,
says that, it's like, well, it's not costing money. It's not
yeah,
impacting our customer satisfaction. It's just really annoying.
hmm,
It's yeah,
absolutely,
really annoying is solving the things that are really annoying is there's a value in that, but prioritizing it above other things that
yeah,
actually increase revenue, reduce cost, satisfy a client or a legal need.
hmm,
Well, let's talk about our priorities, and then all
yeah.
of a sudden that person goes, "I am
Oh,
far less annoyed with this right now."
oh, I get it. Oh
Yeah.
man.
So
Well, we got to get back to our day jobs over here, but we love talking to you guys, and thank you so much for all the great questions. Thank you to those of you who joined us from our TikTok lives this week. It's always fun to see you over here on LinkedIn as well. So with that, we go live every Friday. We'll be around next week, and then we also have 2 lives over on TikTok. So if you follow me specifically over there, you can kind of jump in and ask those questions as well. But thank you to the audience. Thank you to Adam. If you have any follow-ups on this, go ahead and shoot me a DM, and I'll get you to the right spot. So we'll see you next week, my friends. Have a great weekend. Bye.
bye.